All right, greetings. This is Germane here. Thank you for joining us for this series. As we often remind you, the series starts with card number 1 and the information makes much more sense when you watch from the beginning. Today's segment, we are returning to the story of the Zetas. It's been a little bit of time since we last discussed them, and we left them in the part of their story that is connected with the first era, or the past, as it is written on the Zeta cards. And today we pick up the story in second era Zeta. So just to remind you where we left off, in the first era, the Zetas experienced their species crisis, where they began to notice they could no longer reproduce, where their planet was dying, and when they began to have the realization that they created it all themselves through the split between the mental and emotional bodies. And so with that realization, they called out for help from the galactic family, and they received help in various ways. One of the ways was through the connection with humans. For through the interactions between humans and Zetas, they began to reconnect with the parts of themselves they had lost. And humans began as well to work through a lot of their fear. The relationship then was essential for the evolution of both species. So since the last time we talked about the Zetas then, they have been going through their healing crisis, their growth, and their interactions with humans as a way to reconnect their mental and emotional bodies. So now we pick up the story with second era Zeta. The second era for the Zetas is characterized by the process of the integration of their mental and emotional bodies through the human experience, through human contact. We go to the first card here. We have number 79. Again, it's Zeta Reticuli, present or second era, and the theme is renewed hope. What does that mean? Well, of course, on the surface, it's quite obvious, because when the Zetas were having their species crisis in the first era, you can imagine that there were a lot of dark times, and there was the sense of death, the sense that they were dying. And even you as human, when you are in that kind of dark place, it's very hard to see that you will move through it and that there is another side to the experience. So this card, Renewed Hope, is referring to the first glimmers that the Zetas had as they began to move through their darkness, as they began to move through their fear. And being that they were not a very emotional species, as you well know, the idea of hope or of optimism is a new concept, really, for them. So when they began to feel that as they were coming through the darkness, they could see a light at the end of the tunnel, and they began to feel a spark in the emotional body of hope, of optimism, and actually the idea of looking forward to the future. We could say this was one of the first surprising emotions they felt and didn't really understand. They kind of knew what it was, but because it was such a new experience, it was almost orgasmic for them, in the sense that it was so intense. Something humans might call a small emotion of hope was intense for them. So that's the story behind this card. But what does this have to do with you, for instance, if you were to get it in a reading, the Renewed Hope card? Well, it's referring to the idea that is encouraging you to move through the darkness, to move through the pain, to move through whatever the challenges that you are experiencing in this moment, and know that there is another side of it. But you actually have to walk through the challenge, or walk through the darkness in order to get to the other side. Because as you know, many people prefer to try to take a side trip, or to go around the obstacle instead of through it. And usually when they try to go around the obstacle, they just find another one. So it is an encouraging card to remind you to walk through with boldness, with enthusiasm, and with trust that on the other side you are going to see the light, so to speak, at the end of the tunnel. So you can apply that then to your life circumstance. And of course, as we always say, use your intuition when you're reading the cards, because another idea may pop up for you specifically. We never really like to have generic meaning for every card. So we give you different ideas and we give you the story behind the cards, but we really want you to use your intuition that might be inspired by what we've said, but that is unique for you. So renewed hope in that sense is referring to allowing yourself to walk through the dark jungle when you don't know what's on the other side, and trusting the light is on the other side, and allowing yourself to feel the experience step by step. All right, so next we have, again, we're in the Zeta Reticuli second era present time stream, card number 80, Embracing Family. And this card also has a very layered meaning. If we are to apply it to the Zetas themselves, it has to do with the idea of how when they had the mental and emotional split, even though they were, in a sense, a group mind, they were also very separated in the sense that they did not allow that group mind or the connection between them to be felt through the heart or through the emotional bodies. It was mostly felt through the mind. And therefore, you could say it was kind of like a sterile experience, where they might have said, oh yes, we are all connected, we are one, but it was an idea rather than a feeling. So as they began to go through this awakening process and healing process within their species, they began to, in a sense, rejoice in the connections, not only with each other, but with other species as well. And this is where the humans really came in, because the contacts that they had with humans, while sometimes frightening for humans, were at the same time very heartfelt for the Zetas, which is one of the reasons why they could not understand sometimes why humans were so afraid. Because for them, it was a revelation. It was an opening of the heart and a strong feeling that they had never felt before or couldn't remember feeling until their dim ancestral history. So if you have gotten the Embracing Family card, yes, you can look at it more on the superficial level if you need to, if that's what's arising in your life regarding the friends and family you have around you, and that a message to perhaps open yourself more to them. But we're going to extend that meaning both macrocosmically and microcosmically Macrocosmically, of course, also referring to your galactic family, not just your human family. It might be a message for you if you're having contacts that you're afraid of, as an example, to let yourself open to them more so that you can embrace your family and they can embrace you. On the microcosmic level, it is also similar to the idea of the melting pot card from Third Era Earth, which has to do with embracing the different parts of yourself that you have kept separate, or that you have been afraid of, or maybe that you did not even know existed within you. Embrace all of those separate parts, because all of those separate parts within you are like a family too. And they need to be recognized as a functioning unit, as a family within you, before the integration process can happen. So those are several more meanings for the Embracing Family card. And again, it depends on what's happening in your life and the other cards around it. But we trust that your intuition will show you the meaning that is right for you in that moment. And recognize that sometimes the meaning changes when you get the cards different times. All right, next we have number 81. Again, Zeta, learning to nurture. So this continues to follow the thread that we've been weaving since the beginning, where as the Zetas began integrating the mental and emotional bodies, and most specifically getting in touch with the emotional body, they were brought to a place where they had to embrace other aspects of themselves, whether internally or externally, and that then will lead them to the realization that in their previous sterility, not physically, we mean emotional sterility, let's say, in their previous emotional sterility, they were not open to others, and they could not use the heart energy to make any connection with anyone or anything. And to take that a step further then, they even could not connect with themselves. So the learning to nurture idea is very directly related to how the Zetas learned then to nurture each other, to nurture the humans that they were interacting with and other species they were interacting with. But more than anything, how could they nurture themselves? And this had to do with going deep within and noticing where they starved themselves, so to speak. Where they starved themselves from making the connection with the universal energy by cutting off that emotional connection. So it's sad to say a little bit for the Zetas in that sense that in order to learn to nurture, they first had to see where they starved themselves. But the lesson is very important because it also applies to humans. As you learn to nurture those around you, and especially learn to nurture yourself, part of that learning is a recognition and a clear seeing of where you have starved yourself. Now, as we're saying that, we're sensing a reaction from some of you watching this, that some of you are having a bit of an aha, or a little bit, what we're sensing is an in-breath, like a realization of something. So we're going to leave it at that, because this is your own forensics exercise for you to go in and follow the trails and find where you have starved yourself. And that is going to be like a doorway that will open into deeper and deeper understanding of yourself and what you came into this life to heal. So that's the card, learning to nurture. You see, it's much deeper than the surface level. Then we have number 82, returning the favor. again, Zeta, second era. And this card really is still an extension of the last card. So when you learn to nurture, as an example, when you then see where you have starved yourself, you realize it was a lesson. It was a very big lesson, a very big valuable lesson. And in that realization of the lesson, there is often a passion that is ignited to share that lesson with another. So again, this card kind of is similar to the Being the Mentors card from the human future time stream, in the sense that as you awaken, as you open, as you see where you've cut yourself off from the connection with the universe, there is a sense of hope. Again, we go back to the first card, a sense of excitement and a sense of overflowing, where you want to share this with others. And we're really going to encourage that, returning the favor. So with the Zetas then, as they began to have this understanding of where they starved themselves, so to speak, and they began to then want to be of service more, this is when they, in a sense, moved to a higher level of their interactions with humans, where they began to see that the human relationship was much more than just scientific study, but it was actually the sharing of experience to help both species shift to a higher level of evolution. And so you're going to see then that later on, when we move to the third era Zeta, which is the era of their enlightenment, how this returning the favor was, let's say, the turning point for them, when they began to want to give back in a way through their hearts they had never done before. It led to their third era consciousness, which will be coming later. All right, sorry to leave you hanging. Now, if you've gotten this card then, the returning the favor card, in your reading, you can think of all that we've said about it and see if you can apply it to your life. Is there a lesson you have learned that was very moving for you, that you want then to give back to another? And if so, you are encouraged to do so. But also recognize that maybe you are the recipient of this, meaning that someone else in your life might be attempting to give you something or give you their wisdom. And ask yourself, is it time for you to receive it? So we're going to ask you again with this particular card, returning the favor, to look at your life circumstance, use your intuition, and remember that often that desire to give sometimes comes from the recognition of where you were starved and the giving back to yourself, which then spills over into reality. And now you can see then the spiritual journey the Zetas had in the second era, which then leads to their awakened era, which is coming later on as we work through the cards in this series. All right, so thank you very much for your attention. It is a joy for us to present this information for you. We would say it's a little bit hard to choose what to present for each small segment, but we trust it is exactly what needs to be presented. Until next time then, we send you much love.